All right, we are live. Hello, my Omnivores. Thanks for joining us today. We have a really cool live stream. We're going to talk about our latest contest, the Omniverse Retroverse. We have joining us today Rob Bryant from the creative team. He is
Hey. Hi guys.
one of the key creatives behind the GTC keynotes that you see every year. And there's, I'm going to show a picture of this. So if you want to see the more of like the documentary, what goes on behind the scenes, check out the YouTube video Connecting in the Metaverse, the making of the GTC keynote. He's featured on there, and he talks about all the things that they basically scrapped PowerPoint and did everything inside of Omniverse for GTC this last year. So really excited about that. So Rob, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I joined NVIDIA in November 2020 of last year. So it was shortly after last year's GTC, and prior to that the team was using Maya and Redshift to do a lot of the visuals for the previous keynotes. And there was a mandate afterwards where everyone was supposed to use only Omniverse for this new GTC. And it was really funny because at that time I was like, what's an Omniverse? And so the developers gave me a rundown, overview on what it was. Started to play around with it and realized it was really, really powerful. And then we, like Wendy said, we created the whole GTC keynote using it. And it was great because it was a really great stress test for pushing the software to its limits. And the developers were really, really responsive to the technical issues that we ran into when we were trying to do things like the virtual Jensen and the environment. So it was really cool to see the software grow into what it is now, and it's continuing to grow. So it's really, really awesome, and I can't wait to see what other artists are able to create with this
Right.
brand new tool.
That's what we find the most exciting. You know, on our side, we see a lot of the code, and our community is what makes it beautiful.
Yeah, exactly.
And I also want to introduce Edmar. He's my partner in crime here on the live streams. He's going to be watching the chat and helping me out on this end. Edmar, you want to say hi?
Yeah, hi everybody. So, of course, I want to welcome everyone to our Discord server. I just put a big call out to everybody there. We're still close to 1,000 members on our Discord server. So, so excited, and there may be a giveaway. So, but today we definitely want everybody to jump in, ask questions. We're going to kind of show some tips and tricks and about workflow. Rob, his background is heavily focused in Maya, so I know a lot of Maya artists there that will want to get involved in the contest. So ask questions and just ask away, and we'll definitely try to cover everything we can. We also want to do a quick shout out to Turbo Squid. We're going to show off some of the assets in a second, but for Turbo Squid, thank you so much. They have contributed a really nice set of assets for this contest. We'll talk about that and more in a few minutes, but definitely want to thank them right at the top of this. And for those who have not already registered, GTC Fall 2021 is coming up. So we're going to be talking about a lot of really fun stuff there. We're going to have our second user group meeting at GTC. So we'll paste these links in the chat. But yeah, so let's have some fun.
Yeah, awesome. So what's great about this contest is with our last two contests we gave you the assets, and we basically said do something with these. First one was create an artistic creation and render it out using the Marbles assets. The second one is just basically physics, so no animation, no modeling or anything like that. Just basically create a scene and just have NVIDIA physics do all the fun stuff. This one is really, we want to target our artists and girls. Please send me your stuff. I really want to promote our female artists out there. So this contest is really exciting. You can create your own assets. And Rob is familiar with Maya, so he'll be going through Maya, but Omniverse, you can use Blender, you can use 3ds Max, any of our available connectors in Omniverse, you can use the tool that you want to use. So you're not limited to Maya. You can pretty much use whatever you want to create this. So Rob, I'm going to hand it over to you. So how do we get started?
All right. So as Wendy said, please feel free to hit the chat with any questions that you may have of anything that I'm going over, or if you want to know how something that is similar to what I'm doing is done, I can show you an alternative way of how you can do the same thing or something close to it. So yeah, as Wendy said, any software that you're familiar with, and that includes Houdini, Cinema 4D, anything, as long as you're able to convert it to a USD, Omniverse is like, give it here. I want it. I want it all. So I'm going to start by just kind of going over what the contest is, in case those who are joining may not know. It's basically create your retroverse. So think about when you were a kid and whatever age you were, whether it was an Atari, Commodore, Sega Genesis, Nintendo 64, whatever it was, we want you to recreate a scene that made you fall in love with playing video games. And this environment that was created for you, as an example, is just one way to bring that era back to the art visually. So it's really, really cool. And these are the prizes that you get. First place is going to get an A6000, which is retail at like $6K, over $6,000, which is insane.
It's a beast of a card. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Amazing. That's like the holy grail of all real-time rendering. And then second place, you get the 3090, which everybody's trying to scramble to find. So here you go. Third place is the 3080, also beefy as well. So these are great reasons to join and create what makes you happy about art and what brings you back to your childhood. And this is how you enter. All of this is at nvidia.com/Omniverse, and then you can follow the links to the Retroverse contest. And all of these things you can you can see yourself. You can submit your entry. You can sign up, register, all that good stuff. And it's pretty straightforward. But the big thing, big question that a lot of people have, at least my peers, is what is Omniverse and how do you use Omniverse and why should I use Omniverse? And that's what this live stream is for. I'm going to show you how I use it. I'm going to show you some workflow tips that I use currently in my day-to-day at work, as well as my day-to-day in my personal work. I do a lot of personal exploration. So it's a tool that can be used pretty much by anybody. And so let me show you. Well, first thing is, as Edmar said, you are able to download free assets from TurboSquid. Now the caveat is you're able to use a maximum of 3 of these assets. And there's a lot. I've downloaded them here.
Okay, Rob, I can't see what you're doing on your screen. I'm seeing your web browser. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay. No, that's great. Okay, let me.
I'm also wondering while he's doing this, if in each of the 3 contests, which are so different, as Wendy explained earlier, like I wonder, this one actually seems like on somewhat of a technical level, it's not as involved as the last contest was, where there's a lot of physics involved with creating a scene and video. And the first contest, where you really had just have really great creative, way to look at things in very different ways to be able to make your scene unique. This one requires a lot of modeling. It's a pretty involved. I can imagine people probably spend a lot of time on this one.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Yeah, it was Andrew was a beast cranking out all of the visuals for this. So hats off to him for this, and it looks beautiful, absolutely amazing. Okay, can you now see
I can see
my
what,
screen?
yeah, we can see your screen now.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Wendy. That would have been tragic for me to have shown all of that, and you're like, what are you talking about? I don't see anything. Okay, so when you download those assets from TurboSquid, you get this zip file. And in this zip file is another file called TurboSquid. And these are all of the assets that you're able to use in your, that you can choose from to use. But as the contest rules state, you can only use 3 of these. So you have the Apple Mac, you have a camera, 8mm camera, HDRI, NES console, Oculus Rift, all of these things that you can use just to get you started. So, and what you'll find is when you click on either of those folders, you have a USD already. So these assets are already compatible with Omniverse as a .usd, which is great. So you don't have to do any conversion to these assets. So the floppy, it's right there. The materials are there. Any textures related to that USD, it's already there to get you going. Okay, so cool. What I'm going to show you guys is number 1, how to import some of these assets into Omniverse. And then I'm going to show you how to create your own assets. I'm going to be using Maya, but of course, any 3D app that you feel comfortable with, and export your own custom assets from your native 3D app. And then I'll show you how to bring your custom assets into Omniverse. And we'll just sort of make a pseudo scene assembly right here, and you guys feel free to ask questions as I'm going if anything looks unique to you or strange to you, and I can kind of explain to you why we're doing things the way that we're doing it. Okay, so first of all, we have to launch Omniverse. So there is a launcher that allows you to choose many different things, but I'm going to simulate clicking the launch button. You're going to have a splash screen, and the first thing you'll see is this. So very similar to any 3D app that you're familiar with, you have your Z for your backwards and forwards, your X, left and right, your Y up and down. And over here, the stage is what in Maya you would call your outliner. So these are where all of your geometries and your lights are going to be listed. So right now there's just a default light by default, just so that there's something in the scene so that you can see what you have. Right now we're currently in the real-time engine, and that's great for feedback, for performance. You can sort of dolly around the scene really quickly, but you can also choose to RTX path trace, and this is where your reflections, your refractions, your global illumination, you're going to get all of those features here. This is what I'm going to be showing you when I'm starting to light the assets here inside of Omniverse. But for now, I'm just showing you that you have 2 different modes that you can kind of use while you're assembling your scene and then while you're actually rendering your scene. I personally like to use real time when I'm just sort of setting everything up, bringing all my assets in, just so the load times are shorter. And then I click RTX when I'm ready to get down and dirty.
The fun button.
Yes. Yes. All right. So then under the content tab, you're able to bookmark what you want. And I've downloaded, or I've bookmarked that Retroverse Contest TurboSquid asset folder that I just showed you, that I just downloaded and unzipped. And that is here. So the way that you can bookmark it is, right now I'm actually on my computer navigating to downloads folder. I can right click on it and choose add bookmark. And of course you can change this to whatever you like that will allow you to quickly remember what this is. And once you add that bookmark, instead of having to navigate every single time you want to bring another asset in, it's up here. It's right here. So now I can go through all of those assets that we've downloaded and quickly drag them into Omniverse. So the first one I'll use is just the Macintosh 128K. So all of these folders here are where your textures are going to live. So the keyboard case, this is the texture for the keyboard case. This is a bump map for any logos that are going to be used for that particular asset, and you can cycle through all of those. But in the actual folder, let me move this off to the side, you'll see the USD. This is what you're going to use to drag into Omniverse. So I'm going to make my viewport a little larger. And one thing that I've learned is you don't want to drag your asset into the actual viewport. That makes things really, really slow, and sometimes it may hang a little bit. My workflow is to click and drag into the stage. Once we do that, we'll wait a couple of seconds for, yep, and there we go. So now we see the Apple Macintosh 128, and all of these cubes are the geometries. So in Maya, this would be this main top of the hierarchy would be your group node, and then inside of your group node would be all of the geometries that is a part of that group. And every single USD also get what's called a looks folder. This is where all of your materials are. So for the paint black, we have the keyboard base, rubber gray, mouse cable, and so forth, logos, red paint. And just like any other 3D app, based on what material you choose, you have parameters and properties. So you have your albedo map, you have color space if you want to change it. You can even desaturate a map that you already have if you want it to be black and white, or if you want it to be less saturated or more saturated. You can make it brighter by adding albedo add, and so it's kind of like really basic color corrections to your texture, which is really cool. Sometimes you just want a little bit of a change to your source image that doesn't require going back to Substance or Photoshop or Mari to change your texture. Sometimes you just want it to be a little less saturated, and here you can do it right inside of Omniverse, which is very, very cool. So of course you have your other options, your reflectivity, roughness amount. You actually can include a map here. So if you have a roughness map where something's grungy, you know, there's shiny parts and there's rough parts, you can actually add that here into your roughness map slot. But you can also add influence. So if you don't want it to be just 1-to-1, if you want to add a little bit of grunge, you can just make this 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. So you can, again, Omniverse is really cool because it allows you to sort of tweak your textures to a certain extent while you're also in Omniverse. Now, of course, it's not a full-fledged texture authoring program, but it does allow you to manipulate your textures just a little bit. Metallic map, if you want to add, if your material is supposed to be metal. Specular map, AO, if you have that for real-time. All my real-time gamers or game artists will know what that is. If you want to add a little bit of crevice. Emissive for incandescence. Opacity, you can have an opacity texture. And of course your normal map, which is great. What's also awesome about Omniverse is you have two normal maps. You have a normal map and then you have a detail map. So if you can think about a purse, a lady's purse, for example. A Coach bag has the leather bump that everyone knows, but what if there was also a logo of Coach embossed into that leather? Well, the normal map would be the Coach logo, and then the detail map would be your leather bump, that, you know, high frequency bump that we all know and love from leather texture. So that's really cool.
The best way I've ever heard that explained in my life.
I love fashion, so I'm gonna always run to that when I need to explain something.
Go with what you know. Yeah.
Stick with what you know. So that's really cool. You also, and just so that you guys know, the normal map, this normal map is tied to your main texture maps. So at the top where you have your albedo and your roughness, all of this is connected to this first normal map slot. And I'll show you why that's important in just a few seconds. So, okay, we have the normal map and we have the detail normal map. Now when we scroll down, you have UV parameters that you can also change. And this is where you can tile things and you can make things repeat. So again, we have the texture. We can translate the texture, rotate the texture, or scale the texture. Again, this is for your first normal map, as well as your albedo, your roughness, and your specular. But we also have a detail scale, texture scale. This is for that leather bump. If we want it for just the bump to be repeated, but not the coach logo, you could actually repeat just the leather bump separately from your main normal map. And that's really powerful.
That's awesome.
It allows you to separate the two. Okay. Hopefully that was somewhat understandable, somewhat clear. If not, again, throw some questions. And I'll pause here. Does anyone have any questions so far?
I think the main thing we want to just mention really quick is that the Turbo Squid assets are specifically provided for this contest. So you cannot use them for other projects you may be working on unless you were to go ahead and license them from the Turbo Squid website. So I just want to just clarify that.
Good point. Very good point. All right. So, we kind of gone through a little bit of the interface, a little bit of the stage, and a little bit of the properties. Now, when you see me sort of bouncing through different areas, at least you're somewhat familiar with where I'm going and why I'm going there. So now let's start looking at the asset itself. It frames the asset. So no matter where you are in the scene, it just sort of makes it full screen, which is a cool hotkey just for quickly getting close to your asset. And this is what we have. It's what you would...
I remember that guy.
All right. Oh, this is good that this happened. So everything in Omniverse is dockable. So it allows you to, right now I have the properties panel, which broke off. So the metal here sort of broke off. But that's cool because you can just hover over where you want it to be. Like if I wanted it to be above the stage, now the stage is down here and the property menu is up there. But if I want it to be where it was in the beginning, I can just put it was when I began. So, all right. So this is what we have. Even got the labels in the back.
Wow.
I mean, this is a heavy-duty asset right here.
Looks like you can even read the labels. That's amazing.
No, it's the real deal.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's the real deal. It's amazing. All right, so now, so that's how you get your asset from Turbo Squid into Omniverse. And of course, what if it's not supposed to be at 000 world space? What if you wanted it on a table or somewhere? If you click on the utmost node of the group itself, you'll see it has transforms. So I can move it up, move it down. I can move it, well, this is left and right. It's rotated, pointing to the left, but same thing. And back and forth. And it comes in rotated -90. So it's possible whoever authored this asset may have been using another software where Y isn't pointed up, or maybe Z is X instead of the other way around. But again, that's no problem because all we have to do is 090 and 090, or leave -0 and of strange. This is great. Also, it's great. Another great thing to happen. So whenever I'm working with someone else's asset, in this case, TurboSquid, what I like to do is create an Xform. So if I right click on the stage and go to Xform, this allows me to have a null that is the way that Omniverse wants it to be. So if I hide the computer for a minute, we can see that Z is pointed this way, and X is this way, and Y is up and down. And this is a great way to make any of your asset behave as you intend for it to. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this Apple Macintosh asset inside of my newly created Xform. And it's going to take a minute, and then it will parent the laptop inside of this Xform. And of course, what I usually like to do is copy the name, and then I'll paste it after the Xform. So underscore Apple Macintosh. This way I know what it is, but I also know that it's my Xform that I created inside of Omniverse. Now, as you can see, everything is zeroed out. So all of my translates are zeroed out, and all of my rotations are zeroed out. So now when I rotate Y, it behaves as expected.
That's a great tip.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So this way you're not destroying or destructive on the asset, but you're just putting it in a container that OV can understand a little bit better. So now if we wanted to put this on the desk somewhere, we could. Okay. All right, so what about custom assets? What if, it's great that TurboSquid gave us some, but I'm an artist, I'm a modeler, I'm a texture artist. I want to bring my own stuff in. I don't want to be, bound by someone else's ideas of what my retro life was. All right, cool. So I'm going to open up Maya. And for example, since we don't have an infinite amount of time, I'm just going to build a cyc or a backdrop, or a seamless backdrop, as a lot of people call it in the photography world, for the Macintosh to sit on. And I'll build it from scratch just so that everyone can see the process. So this plane, I'm gonna make it, let's see, 10,000 by 15,000. All right, and let me change my near and far. Cool. All right, so let me put on wireframe so we can all see. All right, cool. What I like to do, and maybe this is too much TMI, but just for anyone who's looking and maybe using Maya, my width and my height, I usually try to make my subdivision width and subdivision height the same. But instead of having a 10,000 subdivided width and 15,000 subdivided height, I'll just take the first two numbers. So width is 10,000, I'll leave it at 10. Height is 15,000, I'll just make that 15. And now we have perfect quads. So UV, I'm just going to UV plane, I'm going to project the UV from the Y. And just make sure that my UVs are proper, so that they're square, not stretched. Again, for time, I'm just gonna be real quick about it. So, all right, cool. Now we have that. Let's add some type of a bin deformer. And again, this may be TMI, but I think maybe it's good to see from the beginning to bringing it into OV.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right,
we have been using Maya for.
I have been using Maya. I don't want to date myself, but at least since 2002.
Wow. Okay. So you're definitely Maya vet. I mean, it shows.
It has changed a lot since 2002. That's for sure.
It definitely has. Now that is 100% for sure. Okay, now this is also great too because Maya, my forward Z and my side is X and my up and down is Y. This is what Omniverse is adhering to as well, just for anyone to know. I know there are my Blender artists out there. Blender, I believe Y is back and forth and Z is up and down. So that's good to know when you're building your assets that Omniverse is looking for Y to be up and down and for Z to be forward and backwards as you're building your assets. Or you can just create an Xform node when you bring it into Omniverse and do what I just did. Either way, whatever makes you happy at night. All right, so now I'm going to just sort of make this guy, maybe something like that is fine. Cool, all right. And maybe I will give it a few more subdivisions. So maybe I'll go 10 and 30, just to make it a little smoother. All right, cool. So now I have it. It has proper UVs. I'm gonna name it Psych. Not like Psych Your Mind, but Cyclorama, like Psych, CYC, which is the photography term for it. All right, and then when you install the Maya connector, you get this menu item at the top where you're able to export things. Because the materials, I want to show you the materials being applied in Omniverse. I'm not going to apply MDLs here inside of Maya because I want to show you how to do that inside of Omniverse. But you can do it in Maya and export your asset with those materials. But just for the sake of showing you, I'm going to show you how to export this from Maya to Omniverse. So you go to Omniverse, click on Export. There's a lot of options here. The main thing you want to know to make sure that it's checked is the include MDL. That's really it. Everything else can be off, and you just want to make sure you're exporting what's selected. Otherwise, if you have a massive scene with hundreds of assets, it's going to try to export every single thing inside of your session. And that's not what you want. So, and I've done that before. So, speaking from experience, bad day. I mean, sometimes it'll take 45 minutes or an hour for you to export because what it has to do is convert every single piece of geometry to a USD. So, just make sure you choose export selected when you're exporting your assets one by one. Okay, so here I created inside of the same retro contest turbo squids folder, I created a folder called demo. And I'll show you how I like to structure my scene. And this is great for a contest like this where you're going to be assembling a lot of assets. So I like to break my hierarchy up into 3 different folders. One is for my props, which is self-explanatory. One is for the scenes, which is also self-explanatory. And one is for the textures, also self-explanatory. So that way, when I open up my props folder, I can create a folder, a separate folder for every single asset. I have a folder that I've already created called Psych. I already did it just to demo this test, but I will, it was a different Psych than this, so this is great to see. So make sure that your asset is selected, it's highlighted, and you would name it whatever you want. In this case, I named it Psych USD. I make sure include MDL is selected, and then I click export. This was a very simple asset, so it kind of just blazed through it real quickly. If you have a very dense, like a character or something like that, it may take a few more seconds or maybe a couple of minutes. But either way, it'll go through the same process. And now, inside of Omniverse, remember that bookmark that I made? That was here. I now have my folder demo, and now it has props, scenes, and textures.
Nice.
And now in my props texture, oh, there's the Psych. Oh, there's the USD. I'm sorry. Do you guys have a question?
No, it's great.
Cool. So now all I have to do is the same process. Instead of dragging to the viewport, I'm going to click and drag to the stage. Now, you can see it's teeny tiny, but it's there. And I think that I did not rotate. There we go. Now it's rotated. That is pointing forward. So now, with the cyc, we can do the same thing. Let's create our Xform. We can double click on the actual asset name and copy that. And double click on Xform underscore cyc. And then we'll parent the cyc underneath this Xform. Now, let me zoom out a little bit. Now, I can make this 15 by 15 by 15. And now here we are. We have our own custom asset inside of Omniverse. I'm going to cut the grid off just so that we can kind of see a little bit better. And of course, now that we have our own Xform, we can move it forwards and backwards or whatever we need to do. And again, it has great UVs, so even if you want to have a checker pattern inside of Omniverse, it's gonna look just like it's supposed to. I'm still in real time just for speed and to show you guys how to import your custom assets. So that's pretty much how you get your own asset from Maya or any other 3D app into Omniverse. One thing to note is Omniverse wants for all of your geometry to be a USD. So it doesn't matter where you create your custom assets, it just needs to be converted to a .usd file. That's the only caveat. That's the only requirement, really. And I'll pause here and ask anyone if they have any questions so far.
We do have one.
Yeah.
I'll let Wendy say it.
Okay.
Low, so Wendy, why don't you say it?
So I do want to mention, John Malcolm mentioned that there was no need to change anything in Blender. The USD imported perfectly.
Nice.
So that's good to know. We do have a question. It's from If Lastman. Could you have brought in a cyc as a sublayer instead?
You could have. You could. The main thing, I mean, it depends on how you want to structure your project. Layers versus stages, they're kind of synonymous, but there are some instances where they are different. But for this particular demo, this would be the most straightforward way. When you drag your asset from the browser to the stage, it also creates it in your layer panel, your layer hierarchy as well. But you could drag it from here to there, but that's, that is another way.
Okay.
Cool. All right, so now what about adding materials to this? So now that we have, we're gonna assume all of the assets that we have for our scene, that we want for our scene. Now we're gonna switch from real-time performance mode to RTX path tracing. All right, cool. Now everything is gonna look like it's in the sun because of this default light. The default light is mainly there just so that it doesn't matter how dark your materials are of the asset that you're bringing in, you'll be able to see it. Sometimes it's a bit hard when you're bringing in assets, and especially if it's really, really small, and if there's no light, sometimes you'll be scrolling forever to try, like, where's my asset? Where's my asset? So this default light is just really, really bright just so that you can see where your assets are at all times. I usually, once I have all of my assets inside of Create, I usually delete that and then get to creating my own custom lights, which is what we'll do now. But before we do that, let's put some type of a material on this site. Right now, it's nothing because I didn't export the site with an MDL that OV can understand. So in order to create a material for it, you can do it one of two ways. You can create, and I'll do both. So the first way is to create a material by right-clicking in the stage. Go to Create, go to Materials, And then you have a few presets. So you have glass, hair, PBR clear coat, Omni surface, surface blend, volume density for working with VDBs, if you're working with VDBs, preview surface, custom, or even custom MDLs. I'm going to just choose PBR just for ease of use. And of course, you can double click on it and name it. And we'll name it Psych MDL or whatever you want. And now that we have it, and remember I said every asset has this looks folder. This looks folder is the container for all of your materials for that particular asset. Well, if you're creating your own assets and your own materials in Create, it's going to put this looks folder in the root folder of the root hierarchy of your world. So this is where it will be. And every material that you create after this within Create is going to populate inside of this looks folder.
Okay. It's good to know.
Yes. It's just a way for them to sort of tidy everything up, keep everything in the same place.
Keeps it organized for me.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yes. Now, as I said before, but every time you export an asset, it's going, even though I didn't create a material for the psych, it's trying to bring in my Lambert, which is the default material in Maya, into Create. But of course, Create doesn't know what a Maya Lambert material is, so it's really just white. So we're going to disregard this. It's connected to the psych, but we don't want that. We want our own custom material that we just created. So you click on your geometry and you right click on your newly created material and you scroll down to bind material to selected objects. You click on that and now we have our custom MDL on our psych. And if we change our base color to red or green or blue or pink, we can do that. Now the great thing about it, because we have UVs on our site, again, we can go down and we can either make our UV, our normal map simple, or we can get really complex with the detail. So we can do whatever we want with that. But for now, I'm just going to make it a gray, like a 50% gray, and I'm going to make it really, really, really shiny. So my roughness amount, I'm going to put as 0.1. So now we can kind of see a little bit of reflections for this guy. Cool. And maybe I'll make it a little bit darker just for dramatic effect, because it's cool. Alright, now I'm going to show you guys how you would light this. Right now, when we rotate around, it's pretty bland, it's pretty flat. I mean, we have reflections, but it's really not moving anyone. So first thing I do is create a light. In order to create a light inside of Create, you right click in the stage and go to Create, Light, and you have a few different lights you can choose. Distant light has no end. It's an infinite ray of light. Sphere light is really cool. It's almost like a lantern. If you are familiar with photography, this sort of a lantern softbox, so it's very soft and diffuses the light a lot, so it's great for adding really soft shadows. Rect light is what you normally know as an area light. A disc light is a circular light. Cylinder light is for like a neon sign, a pole that you want to be illuminated but have a little bit of depth. And then you have your dome light for your HDRIs. For this particular case, I'm going to use a rect light. Now notice I left the default light on until I created my custom light. And that is because, again, sometimes it's hard to know where your light is if you don't have light in the scene at all. Now I can either turn my default light off or I can delete it altogether. For this case, I'm just going to turn it off. Okay. Now, and I'm going to take a mini detour. I'm going to come back to lighting, but first I want to show you how to create a camera, because I want to show you how you would light to the camera and how you would light your scene based on your own composition. So in order to create a camera, you can do it two ways. You can do it from here, right-click in the stage, create camera, or you can go up here, create camera. And this is the same thing for light as well, if you wanted to use your menu items here. Sometimes the stage is just easier since you're already over in this direction. So we'll just create a camera here. And I like to name mine shot cam. You can name it render cam, whatever you want. And now I can show you how to choose that camera. Right now we're in the perspective view. So if we click on this, you can go to the top view, the front view, the right view, or this new camera that I just created called shot cam. Now the shot cam is at 000 by default. But let's say I want, let's see, maybe this is good. All right, cool. All right, so now that we have our shot, I think I want to rotate my sight so that it's not cut off on the side. So that's no problem. I go back to my Xform sight, and then I just rotate it this way. It's not fully covering my composition, so I'll just scale it here, or I'll scale the whole thing to be 25, 25, 25. Cool. So now we have full coverage and we can see our asset. All right, cool. I'll pause here and ask if anyone has any questions at this point.
So there's a question, but I'm not sure what they mean. Said, would it be possible to make some holdout material in some way? I'm not sure what a holdout material is.
You mean for compositing?
Possibly.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can. I mean, there isn't necessarily.
Yes, for compositing. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you kind of can, but at this particular moment for Omniverse, it's not really set up like your traditional renders, like your Arnolds or your V-Rays or your Redshift, in that you can create different render passes. Like for reflection and specular, that feature doesn't currently exist in Omniverse yet. So the holdout isn't necessary at this point. But sure, you could create a material for this. For example, I'll use the sight since it's a little more less complicated. And I'll click on the sight and create and material, and we'll just say Omniverse PBR. And then of course you can make it all red and make your specular non-existent. And that's similar. But the problem is, because at this moment you can't render out this as a pass, you would have to render this in addition to your entire beauty render, and then in post use that to composite. So right now Omniverse it's kind of what you see is what you get, and this contest is sort of pushing that concept of, we want for what you're assembling in Omniverse to be what the world sees, without compositing, without tricks, without any type of altering the scene or altering the scene. So does that answer your question?
I think it did. They said thanks.
Okay.
I'll wait and see if they respond. We do have another question.
Okay.
Says, how are you usually choosing? Okay, they said kind of answers their question.
Okay. Okay.
So how are you usually choosing to use reference, payload, or layering in practice?
In practice, I try not to, and I will tell you why. It is a feature in Omniverse, but for this particular contest, it may or may not introduce issues that may be difficult to work around. Yes, the feature is there, but the software is still being pushed forward.
Yeah,
so
okay.
Yeah.
Still okay.
Yeah. A good question. It's there. It's coming. It's getting better.
Okay. I thought there
right.
was another question, but it looks like he was another user was helping answer the compositing question. So I think we're okay.
All right. Cool.
We're good to go.
Yeah. And at any time, if it's something that's related to like what I'm talking about right there, feel free to jump in. And
oh yeah.
All right, cool. So this ugly little light here is the default light. We turn that guy, or I'm sorry, the rectangle light that I haven't moved yet. So now, how does one light this scene? Now that this is what we have, obviously your scene is going to be much more complicated than this. We don't have time to build that. But now that we have our camera set, this is our composition. And how do you go back and forth? So a few things that I want to go over. As of right now, you have one layout view, meaning the traditional 4-view layout in Maya that you have here. So you have your top, front, side, and perspective. That is coming, but it doesn't exist yet in Omniverse. So what I do, my workflow is first I find my composition. Where do I want my asset to be in this in the frame, and where do I want the reflections to fall? Once I have that, then I switch back to perspective, and then I start to move my lights around. I do things in 2 steps. Sometimes, depending on where my asset is in the frame, I will switch to my perspective view so that I can fully see where my light is, whether it's interpenetrating the ground or whether it's away. And I just click E, by the way. So W is for translating, E is for rotating, and R is for scaling. Similar to Maya, but those are the hotkeys. Just wanted to say that. But so yeah, in some cases, I will put my light, I'll move my light to the vicinity of what I want, of where I want it to be. And I usually try to lock off all of my values to be even. So 90 degrees, 45 degrees, or whatever it is. It could be 70 degrees, but I just don't like 0.2, 0.557. I hate that. So I'm usually going to round it up to the nearest whole number. All right, so then I go back to my shot cam, and let's turn off the default light, and we can start to see
oh wow.
where the light is. Now, what I do, this is my own personal workflow. I know, and let me go back to the perspective view. I know that Z is forward, X is left and right, and Y is up and down. That goes for the entire world space as well as any assets that you create. So this light that we just created is going to follow those same coordinates. So knowing that is once I have a light created and I move it where it is, because it's a little, and this is good to know, for right now in the current the current release of Create, there's somewhat of a bug where if you try to move the light inside of the inside of the camera you're actually rendering from, it actually sometimes the light will kind of jump. It can jump around. Looks like it may be fixed now, which is amazing. The developers are on it.
Oh yeah, they fix things fast.
Yeah,
They're on
that's
it.
amazing. I love it. Absolutely love it. So, all right, cool. So what I usually do, all right, so talking about the XYZ, all right. Now, once I have the light kind of where I want it to be, I go back to my camera. I'm using that same understanding that X, Y, and Z of where it is, of how I want to move my light. For example, if I didn't want for the highlight to make this shape here on the monitor, I would have the Z parameter and I would move this back. Again, I know that Z is forward and backwards. I know that this computer is facing Z. It's facing forward. So when I move this light and I'm just click and dragging inside of this parameter forwards and backwards, it allows me to without having to switch back and forth to perspective, I know where to move that light. And it's actually gonna be a whole number. It's not gonna be that whole 17 point, these numbers here. This is because I moved it in the viewport. So if I wanted something like that, or if I wanted to make a rim light first, I could something like that. Then I like to name my lights. So I say light, rim, right. I could spell. Okay. And before I start adding any more lights, I'll kind of go over some of my tricks on how to get rid of this. So light linking in Maya is what it's called. I'm sure it's called something different in other 3D apps. It's when you're able to illuminate some objects but not the others. In this example, I want for the light to be illuminating my computer, but I don't necessarily want the reflection on the floor. Right now, Omniverse doesn't support light linking. It's coming. We're very, very close, but it doesn't support it yet. Okay, cool. So well then how do I get this nasty big white reflection of this light off of this reflective floor without making the floor rough? I want it to be reflective because it's a cool look, but I don't want for the light to be reflective. Okay, what do? Cool. Let's go over a few of the light parameters. If you scroll down, we have the common things like your color. Of course, we can make our lights different colors. You can also change the intensity of the light by click and drag. I hate that. Click and drag it to whatever you want. If you want it to be whatever, by default, it's 15,000.
To the 8th decimal point. Right.
It's literally my kryptonite. Maybe that's my OCD kicking in. I don't know. So yeah, you have your exposure, which some people feel more comfortable using exposure versus intensity or vice versa, depending on what 3D app or engine you're used to. Either one is kind of synonymous. If I brought this down to 0 and then I increase my exposure to 15,000, or actually I think your intensity has to be at least 1. And yeah, so it gives you a slightly different feel depending on how you're used to lighting. By default, your intensity is going to be at 15,000, exposure is going to be at 0. I suggest to just use intensity just for this particular contest, just so that you can get your work done. And you can normalize power if you want, and then you can change the height as well as the width of your light. Okay, cool. And the texture file is if you have a HDRI that you want to use, that you have softboxes or umbrellas or whatever you want to put in there, and then you're going to get some really, really nice irregular reflection or patterns in your reflections, which makes your render look even more natural and believable. You also can choose between how this is going to affect, this light is going to affect diffuse as well as specular. So of course this floor is highly reflective. So if I made my specular multiplier 0, it's not contributing. It's not kind of. It's not contributing. It's solving that issue, but now any reflective parts of this computer will not be respected. Which,
Gotcha.
if you have a really nice glass ball, then it wouldn't really work. And of course, if you wanted to make your diffuse multiplier 0, then it does the opposite. I use these only when absolutely positively necessary, especially when you're trying to make something look believable. You have visible and light rays. Sometimes you want your light to be seen. In cases where you have like maybe a sign light that maybe has a texture on it, and maybe it's saying, you know, buy more 3080s or 3090s, and it's all green, and you want to see it. This is where you would have your texture be that sign, and then make your light visible to the primary rays. I won't go over fog interaction and caustics, but they're there. All right, shaping. This is what I wanted to show you. By default, it's kind of hidden in the bushes. It's sort of collapsed. The menu's collapsed, and you could overlook it if you're not looking for it. But it's incredibly powerful. In some 3D apps, this is called directionality. Some other apps is called spread. Same thing. You're basically focusing the light. Right now, because the focus is 0, that means it's going to spread everywhere. If we increase the focus to 0.1 or 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, what we're doing, or 5 or 7, we are effectively putting a Fresnel or a spotlight attachment on this light, so that it's only, or in some case in photography it's called a honeycomb grid, where you're focusing the light only to be illuminating what it's pointed to. So it's narrowing the angle of focus, but then when you bring the light forward, you can see now we're having less of that reflection of the light on the floor. We're still able to illuminate our computer. Pause here for just a second for anyone who has any questions so far.
We don't have any questions right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll try to wrap it up so that we're not here forever. But so what I like to try to do is make all of my lights meaningful and not just put lights everywhere, because shadow is just as important as light. So especially when you're creating something like a mood and this whole retro feel, you want to really use your shadows as your strength and not just illuminate everything. So I have my light rim for the right. Now I want to make a light rim for the left. And to do that, I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to duplicate it. It's going to duplicate it in the same exact space as you would expect. And I'm just going to rename this left. All right, cool. So I know that this computer is at 0, 0, 0. I also know that my lights have been moved based on 0, 0, 0. So now all I have to do for my X, which is side to side, is make it negative. And my Y, since I rotated it, I just make this negative. Now it is perfectly parallel with my right light. Now I want to move this light, so let's move it a little further back. And maybe we'll rotate it a little bit and move it a little bit over here. And 15,000 is a bit bright for that, so maybe we'll bring it down a little bit. And maybe we'll get a little crazy and add a little bit of tint to it to give it some mood. All right, cool. Something like that. All right. So now we got a rim light on the right, rim light on the left. All right, let's go with a top light. And I think we will be in a really good spot. So sometimes what I do is I will turn off my other lights that I'm not working on and turn on and only the light that I'm focusing on. So this light I know is going to be my top light. So I'm going to rotate this in X. I know that it's 90 degrees or negative 90 degrees. And we're going to bring it higher. All right. And we want this to actually sort of illuminate the scene a little bit. Again, without illuminating everything. It's very selective. And maybe I make this a little bit smaller. Maybe it's 70 by 70. And I'm doing this on the fly, so if something looks weird, don't be tied to it. Just explore. That's why we do what we love. Okay, now this is just the top light. And now when I add my side light and my fill, now we get something that has a little bit more of a mood without being too dark. But the beautiful part is now we've isolated each part of the image so that we can control how we want it. So for example, if maybe we wanted it to be a little moodier, we can just lower that light, but we still have some illumination on the computer so that the viewer can see, oh, okay, that's a Macintosh, without having it be completely in darkness. Or maybe we do want for there to be a highlight on the front of the monitor. That's cool too. I mean, maybe there's something over there. I don't know. Maybe that's a part of your story. Maybe you want it to be like that. But either way, you're able to kind of go crazy with how you can import your models, create your own custom materials, create your lighting inside of Omniverse, as well as importing assets from somewhere else. I'll pause here and ask anyone if they have any questions.
So just got... Oh, go ahead, Edmar.
Well, I was going to say that I'd imagine that especially for this scene, it's going to be a lot of people lighting up the monitor itself, right? So there's going to be something on the screen, probably a game, maybe their favorite game. So that would be, I feel like we could probably do a whole show just on lighting, and maybe we should. But I think that is worth pointing out. And then the other thing is, I think right now we're planning, because as people can probably tell, USD is a pretty powerful file format, and we're planning right now a full focus show on USD. So, for people who are interested in diving into that, we'll probably do that within the next, I would say, the next month or so is what we're thinking about. So,
nice, exciting.
So I think this is a question about available assets. So Corker says, I have a question. I now make some 3D models, for example, the bed, the table, the TV set in 1990. I look at the rules of the game. We have to make these models ourselves, right? So now I know that I don't know exactly what models we get from TurboSquid, but I don't think the bed, the table, and the TV are included with them.
Correct.
So yes, you would have to model those yourself.
Yes. Yeah. The image that you saw for the Retroverse, that was purely an artist interpretation. But we by no means want for you to recreate that same image. In fact, we're hoping that you'll create something completely different.
Totally. Yep.
Absolutely. Okay. I think that's I don't see any more questions. So when you join, when you get started on this contest, you can come to the NVIDIA website to submit your rendered screens. You can go to Discord and ask for live help. You can go to the forums and post your you can actually post what you're working on and your progress on it and get some feedback from the developers if you want to do that. And also I want to point out that Rob, who is above me in the in the video, he's a judge for the contest. So especially all of these tips and tricks about getting your lighting just right. And I know, Rob, you said use your shadows to really create the mood. He's going to be judging, so he'll be looking for that stuff. Rob, is there anything else that you can suggest as a judge, what you're looking for when you go to judging?
Yes. One thing that I think that a lot of the judges are going to be looking for is please, please, please don't just drop a whole bunch of assets in the scene, a couple of lights, and hit render. Please don't do that. Please be thoughtful about where your light source is coming from, why it's coming from that place, and what it makes you feel like when you see it. This isn't a product rendering exercise. It's an exercise in mood. So this image that you're creating should make the viewer feel something, whether it's nostalgia, maybe it's disgust, maybe the room is completely dirty. It doesn't really matter. We're wanting to be moved in some way. I mean, I know as a kid there was Cheetos all over my floor. I mean, that's just me, and that was my childhood. Right. Now there was tons of Sega Genesis cartridges all over the floor, but to me that was my feeling. And again, we're looking to be moved in some way. It doesn't matter how we're moved. We just want to be moved. And don't just make it an assembly exercise, because that's not what we're looking for. Everything just, and I know, and from an asset creation standpoint, I know there may be moments where you spend days, hours, weeks creating an asset, but please don't let the time that you spend creating that asset dictate you just pooling it with light so that we see every single facet and edge flow, all of your topology. Please just know that that's not the way to go. Make it make sense. Make your lighting make perfect sense.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of and I say this in my other streams, the beauty of the RTX renders, it actually makes the lighting you're seeing fun. It is an absolute joy. Even if you don't know what parameters you're playing with and you just adjust the sliders, you can do some amazing lighting effects.
Yes.
So absolutely, that's what we want to see. We want to see, as well as your created assets, we want to see the light put to work and really present the scene to us. So,
and it would be awesome if artists would document their workflow.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
You know, as they're working on it, we would love to see live streams. If you're doing that stuff, or you're streaming as you're working on the submission, please let us know. We'll promote it. We'll watch it. We'll jump in. We'll help answer questions. But we would love to see how different people are working with Omniverse for this submission. Because I think it's a great opportunity to kind of get artists from lots of different backgrounds in and working on something exciting. So we would love to be part of that journey with you as you go on.
Absolutely, yes.
and for exposure, if you're an artist and you're trying to get your work out there, this is the great opportunity for you to get it out there without having to necessarily, use your normal Instagrams, Pinterest, Behance. I mean, this is a way. I mean, this stuff is going to be everywhere. It's going to be shared in many, many different places. And if it's your work, then there you go. I mean, as an individual artist, can't really ask for much better than that.
Yeah.
Yep. And we have a. I'm just going to pop this up. We do have a gallery page. So on our website, so you're getting the full exposure to millions of NVIDIA. So let me switch over. Yes. So here's a list of all the available resources that we have right now. The public roadmap shows you what we're working on currently, and what we're planning on working on. You have the forums, you have Discord, we have a ton of tutorials on YouTube. NVIDIA On Demand, Edmar was talking about, you know, having a full course of USD. We have a huge course on USD with where you can actually code and see your code working. And of course our gallery page, which gives you a lot of exposure. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the stream here. Rob, thank you so much. I learned a lot.
It was fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time and helping us get started with our contest. Edmar, thank you for doing all the stuff behind the scenes.
Thank you. You're a brilliant host.
Yeah, you're awesome.
So, you know, as always, I love you guys. Send me what you're working on. I want to see it. And take care, and we'll see you at the next live stream.
All right, guys.
Bye.
I'm kinda like complicated.